right. So we're in Atonement Without Sacrifice, section 3 of chapter 3. So, all right. So basically, we are in the early sections of the Course in Miracles, and in the earlier chapters, in the earlier sections of A Course in Miracles, the voice of the Course does a lot of assisting us with a lot of things that need to be reinterpreted, a lot of concepts that are kind of deeply deeply buried in our human mind. He goes into a lot of the, in this one, he goes into a lot of the biblical beliefs or biblical statements that have become the foundation of our human thinking. And so he goes in there and he pulls those up, and so that he can reinterpret them, and before we go on to the concepts further in the text. Okay, so he's going to be doing a lot of reinterpreting of some old biblical stuff that has now become old human thinking. All right. Okay. So then the section before this was called The Principle of Miracle Workers. Okay, and what that section was about was things that people who are here to help, the helpers, the teachers of love and peace on the planet, those are the miracle workers. And so the Course in Miracles says that a miracle worker is anybody who at some moment has decided that they would like to be of service to the healing of mankind. Okay? In one place, in one way or another, they saw someone else's interests as not separate from their own. In one moment, they went, if this person feels better, if this person is helped, if this person's call for help is answered, then that is my benefit too. Okay? It says in that one moment, your purpose is changed, and you become a teacher of love. You become a teacher of God. You become a miracle worker, even if you don't believe in God. Isn't that interesting that in that one moment where you see somebody else's interest is not separate from your own, you realize if they are suffering, I am too, and so I'm going to lend help because that's myself. One moment of that, and your purpose becomes changed, and you become a miracle worker, a teacher of God, a teacher of truth. Isn't that interesting? Even if you don't know that that's what happened, and even if you don't believe in God. Okay? But then there's some of us who really have decided, okay, I just want to be of service here. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I do know that that's what I want to be, and that's what I want to do. I just want to be of service on the planet at this time. He calls us the miracle workers, okay? And that God's plan for the healing of mankind rests on the miracle workers, okay? So then God created this plan that this curriculum calls the Atonement. So here's God. He sees his souls, his children are not happy, right? And so God gives us a plan by which to return back to sanity. A plan by which mankind can be healed, right? And so he gives us this plan. In this curriculum, he calls it the Atonement. It's a plan that God gave for the healing of man, okay? And so in this plan, it's the miracle workers who help the world to wake up, okay? In other words, the world wakes up through us. It's not something God does to us, right? The healing of mankind is a process and a plan that will be facilitated through us, okay, as we extend and practice forgiveness, okay? Mm-hmm.
It's, I was going to say it's funny you bring this up, but it's not funny. It's part of the plan.
That's right.
I was thinking today, I talked to one of my sisters whom I've not spoken to in a long time, just I don't have a very close family, nothing particular. But I realized after about 15, 20 minutes that I was not going to have a conversation with her. I was going to be a stage for her to set up her ego. And And it made me start thinking how frequently most conversations I have with most people are all about fronting, protecting, projecting an agenda. I don't have a lot of real conversations with people.
Yeah, but in particular, people who are like, gee, I'm only here to be of service, right? So, you know, tonight we're going to hear about once you have decided that you are here only to be truly helpful, and that's your purpose here on the planet at this time, what happens is that you become the agents of this great awakening, this bigger plan, right? That was given to us by God. So, but it's guided or implemented by the voice for God, which A Course in Miracles calls the Holy Spirit. Okay, so God gives the plan, and this is a plan that can't fail. It's a plan for the healing of mankind. Okay, but in order for this plan to be fulfilled, we are the agents of it, and so we become of crucial value to mankind. We become of crucial value to mankind, okay? And it's a beautiful thing, because when you realize, hey, there's a plan, there's a great awakening afoot, and I am needed for it. Why? Because most people don't hear the voice for God not through a body, correct? Most people don't just hear the voice for God directly, correct? They can, we can, because it certainly isn't hidden. But most people at this point still need a body to hear the voice of love or the voice of God through, right? And that's why we are so crucial to the healing of mankind and to the implementation of this plan, right? Because most people can't hear God saying, I love you. What do you need? Just ask, right? So they need a body to hear it through. And guess who that's going to be? That's us. And so he's saying in these early chapters, in particular in this couple sections, that once you become a teacher of truth, a teacher of peace, once you become a miracle worker, there's certain things you're going to need to know. Once you become a healer, once you become a teacher, once you say, hey, universe, I'm here to be of service to the healing of mankind, once that happens, you immediately become one, okay? And you become the agents. And he's saying in this section, there's some things you need to know as teachers of truth, as healers, as teachers of peace. There's some things you need to know about your new profession. He calls it our natural profession. He says, being a miracle worker, being a healer, a teacher of truth, it's your natural profession. Now, maybe you don't know that right now, but it's your natural profession. And you take on your new profession even before you understand what the heck it entails. In other words, so, like for instance, I became a teacher of A Course in Miracles way, way before I knew what that meant at all. You know, and I only learned about my natural profession as a miracle worker as I did it, as I, you know, became a miracle worker, as I worked it. Okay? So, this section before this was called Special Principles of Miracle Workers, things that you need to know, right? And you need to, there's a lot of things you need to know if you're going to be a teacher of truth, okay? Now, in this section, Atonement Without Sacrifice, he's like, okay, so if you're supposed to be a teacher of love, a teacher of God, then we need to go in and look at some of those old beliefs, those old biblical beliefs that have now become old, ancient human beliefs related to God, okay? So you may have noticed that there's just a few of us who have some grievances and a little bit of fear around God. Does anybody have any of that growing up? Okay, right. Okay, wait a minute, but I'm a teacher of God, but I still am terrified of God, and I still have old beliefs about what God does to his favorite children. Okay, so here I am supposed to be a teacher of God, but yet I've heard through the grapevine and, and old religious teachings what God does to his special folks. And it wasn't very pretty, huh? So he says that's why a lot of people have a bitter resentment of God and are bitterly afraid of God. Like, wait a minute, God did that to his favorite folks? No thanks. No thanks. I don't need that, really. I've got enough going on. And so in this section, he wants to bring to light some of those old beliefs around God and God's relationship with his miracle workers, so that we can have some of our fears around God undone, healed, corrected. Why? So that we're not afraid to hear the voice for God within us. So that we're not afraid to hear, right? Because that's what we want to be able to hear. We want to be able to hear the voice for love within us. We want to be able to hear the voice for God directing us, guiding us, comforting us, healing us. We want to be able to hear it, right? But if you're afraid of God, then you're not going to want to hear it. So now where he's going to clear up some of those old beliefs about God and those who serve God, okay? So it says, there's another point which must be perfectly clear before any residual fear may still be associated with miracles becomes entirely groundless. Okay. So first of all, I want to go back to just the title of the section, Atonement Without Sacrifice. So atonement in this context is the word for the plan for the healing of man. Okay. So there's a plan, right? And so we could say the plan for the healing of mankind without sacrifice. In other words, there is a plan for the healing of mankind that doesn't entail you sacrificing anything. What? Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to work for God and for the healing of the world, and I'm going to be a teacher of God, a teacher of peace, but God's not going to ask any sacrifice of me. I'm going to work for God, and God's not going to ask any sacrifice of me? For real? Because I thought that's what God did. Right? That's what we all heard, right? God asks for sacrifice from those who serve him. And he's saying, actually, the plan that God has given by which you serve the healing of mankind and be a miracle worker, a teacher of peace, there is a plan for that in which you sacrifice nothing. You don't have to sacrifice your freedom. You don't have to sacrifice your joy. You don't have to sacrifice your life. Okay? So this is the plan to fulfill your function without any sacrifice, with no loss. Wow. I'm going to work for God and he's not going to demand anything of me? Wow. I never heard that growing up, did I? Never heard that. So then it says, here's the first thing that needs to become perfectly clear so that any fear that you still have associated with miracles becomes entirely groundless. The first thing you need to know is the crucifixion did not establish the atonement. The resurrection did. That's the first thing we need to know. Okay? The crucifixion was not what began the plan. Okay? It was the resurrection that established the plan. Okay? So the plan for the healing of man doesn't really start with, well, first, God's favorite son is crucified to punish God's wicked children. That is not how this plan begins. The resurrection began the plan. And this is a point which many very sincere Christians have misunderstood. No one who is free of the scarcity error could possibly make this mistake. And see, if the crucifixion is seen from an upside down point of view, it does appear as if God permitted and even encouraged one of his sons or his souls to suffer. Why? Because he was good. And many ministers preach this every day. Okay, so here's the first thing that needs to be cleared up. And it is not true that God permitted and even encouraged one of his children to suffer. Why? Because they were good. Right? So that is not how the plan goes. And that was not part of God's plan. Okay? So that's the first thing we need to hear. That experience, the whole crucifixion story that we know of, that was not, if only if it's misinterpreted, only if it's seen upside down, does it look like God permitted his favorite son to suffer because he was good in punishment or in payment for God's other wicked children. Wow. Okay, now, do you see why with that perception of the crucifixion and that interpretation of the crucifixion, why many people would become bitterly afraid of God? Doesn't that make God sound like a psycho killer? Wow, I mean, doesn't that make God seem unbelievably cruel? Right? Here's these wicked children. Okay? Here's my favorite child. He's good. I'm going to permit and encourage him to be crucified on a cross to pay for their wickedness. Yeah, how about that? I mean, that makes God sound like a psycho killer. Certainly nobody I'd like to hang out with. And you can also see why, with that old interpretation of God, you can see why we wouldn't want to be anything close to God's favorite children. You know, why would you want to be God's favorite if that's what God does to his favorite ones? Right? And so in that interpretation, you know, you're not going to want to be too good. Right? Because you see what happens to the good. What happens to the good? They get sacrificed on behalf of the bad, right? And so in this perception, in that interpretation, you're not going to want to be too good, and you're not going to want to be very close to God. Interesting.
So does this imply that if the atonement, if everything starts with the resurrection, then Jesus could have died in any manner. It was totally immaterial.
Right.
Because it starts with, see, you thought you could die, but you can't.
Right, exactly.
That's where the story starts.
Exactly.
Line one.
Right.
And we took somebody's other story past and attached it on the front of the story.
Exactly. Exactly.
But really had no bearing on any of it.
That's exactly. And these old beliefs about these old stories, I mean, even if you weren't raised Christian, the whole concept that God, number one, plays favorites, and that God asks for more sacrifice of the ones he loves the best, even to kill them, that old belief about God, that comes up through most religions, that God demands sacrifice. And the more that God loves you, the more he demands of you, which means God demands sacrifice, which means love demands sacrifice. Now, those old stories have come up through most religions. I mean, I was raised Jewish, and it certainly, I mean, think about, in the Jewish story, how God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Why? To prove his devotion. Great! Oh, nice, God. And that's all right, God. I'm good. You can see why the author of the course is like, there's a few things we need to clear up here. First of all, God doesn't play favorites. And he's not going to punish one child because they're good in order to correct his other children who are wicked. Okay? God don't play like that. That's not that. Those old stories about God need to be corrected. The reason they need to be corrected is because, number one, if you have that perception of God, then you're going to be afraid of God, and you're going to be cutting yourself off from the source of your good. I mean, if God is the source of your good, but you're terrified of God because you've learned He demands sacrifice, even unto your life, then you're cutting yourself off from the very source of all abundance, all joy, all healing, all safety, right? And if you have those beliefs about God, you certainly are not going to want to play your part in the healing of mankind, right? Because, you know, you think about some of our greatest teachers of peace and truth, right? What happened to them? Right? It's frightening when you begin to think about playing your part, taking your place among the healers of the world. One of the first things that come up is those old unconscious beliefs about how God treats His favorite ones, and also what happens to those teachers of truth, those teachers of peace that we've had on our planet. Right? And so he realizes that if you're going to take your part among the healers of the planet, you're going to need to look at those old beliefs so that you're not afraid to do so. Otherwise, you're going to be like, nah, that's okay. I don't really want to play my part. I don't really want to stand out like that. Right? I'll just keep doing my own little thing. Right? Does that make sense? All right.
Well, and the wicked are painted as having great wealth and comfort and,
that's right.
and power, and they're the bad guys.
That's
we want
right.
to be like the poor beggar
yes.
who's going to get tortured. He's not just dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Tortured.
Not just killed, but tortured.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another example of the beliefs that God demands sacrifice, and that the more God loves you, the more sacrifice He demands of you. Right? So these are old beliefs that are buried deep in our human psyche that that will come up. Like, you know, when you go, okay, I would like to take my place among the healers of the planet. Okay, I'm ready. When that point comes and you say, I'm ready, all those unconscious, primitive fears will start to surface. And that's why it's at the beginning of the curriculum. He's like, look, as a miracle worker, as a healer, as a teacher of peace, there are some things you really need to address and look at and reinterpret first. Okay? And the first one is that the perception that God permitted and encouraged His favorite son to suffer and to die to pay the price of the sins of His other wicked children, that's a total misinterpretation. It did not happen like that. God does not think that way. And you need to know that, so that you're not afraid to take your part as among the healers of the world, and you're not bitterly afraid of God anymore. Okay? So then it says, and it says, and many sincere Christians have believed this and are still teaching it to this day. But this particularly unfortunate interpretation, which arose out of the combined misprojections of a large number of my would-be followers, has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. This particularly anti-religious concept enters into many religions, and this is neither by chance nor by coincidence. Yet the real Christian would have to pause and ask, how could that be? Is it likely that God Himself would be capable of the kind of thinking which His own words have clearly stated is unworthy of man? Okay, so we're supposed to ask ourselves, okay, is it possible that God is teaching us, you know, don't kill people, honor people, love thy neighbor, and he's telling us to do that, but yet he is going to encourage and permit his favorite son to be killed because his other children were bad? That, you know, is it possible that God would be capable of doing what his own words to man, you know, the opposite of what he's telling us, right? We're supposed to ask ourselves that question. What's the question we're supposed to ask ourselves? Is it likely that God himself would be capable of the kind of thinking which his own words have clearly stated is unworthy of man? Okay? If God says, love thy neighbor, don't kill people, treat other people as you would have yourself treated, then is it likely that God would be doing the opposite and killing his children? Okay? This is the question we're supposed to ask ourselves so that that old belief can be undone. Okay? And this has, you can see how this has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. All right. Now, then it says, the best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. And see, it is unwise to accept any concept if you have to turn a whole frame of reference around in order to justify it. This procedure is painful in its minor applications and genuinely tragic on a mass basis. And persecution is a frequent result undertaken to justify the terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation. The very words are meaningless. What words? That God persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation. Those words are completely meaningless, and they have led to tragic results. Okay? And then it's going to say what tragic results has it led to. This belief that God did that to one of his children. It's been particularly difficult to overcome this belief because although the error is itself no harder to overcome than any other error, men were unwilling to give this one up because of its prominent, quote, escape value. For instance, in milder forms, a parent says, this hurts me more than it hurts you, and the parent feels exonerated in beating a child. Can you believe that the father really thinks this way? It is so essential that all such thinking be dispelled that we must be very sure that nothing of this kind of thinking remains in your mind. The truth is that I was not punished because you were bad. The holy benign lesson that the Atonement teaches is lost if it is tainted with this kind of distortion in any form. Wow. Okay. So the whole belief that God persecuted his own favorite child because his other children were bad, okay? That, he says, we've been particularly unwilling to let go of that story of God because it provided us with a very good escape value. It provided us with our own justification for attacking people for their own good, okay? You know, so we still want to be able to attack people for their own good. In other words, we want to be able to maintain our addiction to attack, but still feel good about it. Yes?
Yeah, this explains the whole, you know, war machine, you know.
That's right.
Because as a Christian nation, you know, and the largest empire in the world, this is our escape, or, you know,
our justification.
Our justification,
yes.
To sending, you know, only our best out to be sacrificed for, you know, the wrongdoing of other nations and other groups. And yeah, it's
exactly. I mean, when you hear Iraqi and Afghanistan vets speaking, sometimes you'll hear them say that a lot of their disillusionment came, they were told they were going to help the Afghanis or the Iraqis and be liberators and help them rebuild their country. And so they felt, you know, good. Oh, we're attacking them for their own good. Only to find out that it really wasn't like that. But we are, in other words, we are a little unwilling to give up that misperception of God as attacking his children for their own good. We are a little hesitant to give up the belief that God demands sacrifice out of us for our good, because we still want to do that with others. We still want to say to our children and the people we're in a relationship with, if you loved me, you would give that up. If you loved me, you would suffer in that way. You would sacrifice in that way. Right? Or, I am attacking you, my dear, because I love you. Right? So, it's a great justification. It has justification value for us. So, we don't want to lose that little, wonderful little trick. That wonderful little trick that enables us to attack other people, tell ourselves we're doing it for their own good, for salvation, and feel good about it. God does it. Right? And then, so the voice of the course is saying, no, he doesn't. He doesn't do that. He doesn't demand that you give up and lose and sacrifice who and what you are and what you want just to prove your love. God doesn't attack you to save you. He doesn't demand you to sacrifice because he loves you for your own good, right? And so that is very ancient, old thinking about God. That has definitely been incorporated into our psyche because we started using it as our own excuse to attack people for their own good. In other words, which is really just a justification. Our fearful mind lives by attack. It's addicted to attack. It is an attack thought. Our ego, our fearful mind, is an attack thought. Our ego, our fearful human mind, is the belief in crucifixion, in attack. That's where the ego came from.
Well, even before the justification, it's the belief that attack can bring good.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, if we didn't think some good would come, we wouldn't have to justify it. There's our error in the beginning, is that no, attack can never bring good.
Exactly. And I like what he says, it is so essential. It is so essential that all such thinking be dispelled, that we must be very sure that there is nothing of this kind of thinking that remains in your mind. What kind of thinking? This kind of thinking, that love and God punishes for your own good. That idea is so antithetical to what is true.
It's abusive. That's what
That's exactly right.
See what you made me do.
That's right. That's right. And I only do that because I love you. That's exactly right. That our old beliefs about God that come up through almost all religions, not just Christianity, they depict God as an abuser, a psychopath, a psycho killer. I mean, really, it's like, no wonder we're terrified of God, and no wonder we suffer so. We're terrified now of the real source of our unending good and our unending abundance. And that's, the stories that we gave ourselves as humans through our religions, it was the most ingenious trick of the ego to make sure we were terrified, bitterly afraid of our source, the source of our good, the source of our abundance, the source of our life. That was ingenious, don't you think? Let's come up with religions that tell us that love punishes, that God punishes you, that God kills to save you, that God punishes you to love you. He said, the very words are meaningless. God's going to kill you to save you. That's ridiculous. And you've got to make sure that those ideas of associating God with punishment and punishment with salvation, we've got to make sure that those beliefs are purged. It's essential. Because until those beliefs are purged, you're going to be afraid of the source of your good. And you are certainly going to be afraid to take your part among the healers of the world. Absolutely. Because if that's what God does to the people who say, I'll save the world. If that's what God does to the people who say they'll save the world, forget it. I got enough problems. Right? I don't need to be then crucified just because I'm good. No thanks. I'll be bad. Only the good die young. Remember that? That's where that beliefs comes out of. Only the good die young. Why? Because God punishes those God loves the most. Great. Well then, please don't notice me, God. Please don't love me.
I found even our fearful beliefs are so deep, even, and we use them to interpret what the Course just said. Like, I need to give up this idol because it will hurt me.
That's right.
When in truth, no, that is a sacrifice, and we're trying to justify it.
Yes.
But really, I need to see, no, that idol never did have any power. I need to see
That's right.
that it would never give me what I want.
Exactly. So
I
it's
don't
not
have to
giving
give
anything.
up anything.
Exactly.
I need to see it as it is.
Yeah. Thank
But
you.
I've caught myself many times thinking along those other lines. You know?
Exactly. And I'll show you the way that it also has crept insidiously into our personal lives, into our personal experience. And that is the whole belief that God demands sacrifice gets translated down into love demands sacrifice. And so now he says we can't even conceive of love without sacrifice. We're like, can't even conceive of it. To us, they're like that. They are the same notion. And so now you can see why we are also afraid of love. Well, how do you know we're afraid of love? What do you mean we're afraid of love? Well, do you see what happens right after you fall in love? Whether it's a mate or a child or whatever, there's a part of you that becomes terrified and starts acting crazy. Right? And starts sabotaging. Right? Because if love demands sacrifice, then the more we love, the closer love comes, the more I'm going to have to lose, the more I'm going to have to suffer and sacrifice. Well, because everybody knows love equals sacrifice, love demands sacrifice. And that idea comes down from the belief that God demands sacrifice of His beloved children. And the more He loves them, the more they have to sacrifice. So now we play that out in our relationships. Now we're terrified of love. Terrified of it. So we're like very actively engaged in the search for love. I really want love, I really want love, really actively searching for it. But then it comes a little closer and we go, and we are afraid of it, and then we sabotage it. Not realizing that I'm sabotaging it because I'm terrified of love. Why? Because I have misinterpreted love to mean something that demands sacrifice. And so the same thing here, he says, it is essential that all such thinking of associating love with the demand of sacrifice be undone, and be purged from your belief system. Because until that belief that love demands sacrifice is out of your thought system, You will be bitterly afraid of love. You may be actively engaged in looking for it, but you'll be looking for the thing you're most afraid to find. And so when you find it, you will run or you will sabotage royally. Right? So but that's how the belief that God demands sacrifice comes down and trickles down into our personal lives.
It's like we have to have a daily mantra of love doesn't cost me anything.
That's right.
We got to say it over and over and over.
You have to. You absolutely have to. You have to rewire your brain. You have to rewire your consciousness to the belief that, listen, if something comes into your experience, if someone comes into your experience, and they are asking you to give up who you are, they're asking you to change who you are, or give up a part of yourself, or sacrifice something in order to have their love, you have to go, love, that's not love, that's fear. Only somebody who has the scarcity belief dominating their mind would ever believe that love demands sacrifice. And so we have to rewire and go, okay, I learned that love doesn't demand sacrifice, so this isn't their love. It's not their love they're giving me, it's their fear. Only fear demands sacrifice. Only fear demands sacrifice.
Doesn't it seem like that seems very widespread to me when I think about it, that most interactions with most people are fear-driven.
That's right.
Fear that you're going to find out who I am. Fear
Right.
that I'm not good enough. Fear of everything. Just fear.
Absolutely,
everywhere.
Absolutely. When you look at the planet right now, you are looking at a world that has been driven insane, literally, by fear and guilt. If you want to see a planet that is completely insane, driven insane by fear, this is it. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And it's only a belief system that's dominated by what he called the scarcity error. Isn't that a great word? He says, I'm going to say that, no one who is free of the scarcity error could possibly make this mistake. In other words, it's only when you believe there ain't enough. Fear. What is fear? Fear is there's not enough. There's not enough. There's not enough love. There's not enough resources. There's not enough time. There's not enough resources. There's not enough love for me. There's not enough love for me. There's not enough love. There's not enough. Only when your consciousness is dominated by the scarcity error could you even possibly believe that love asks you to give up something to receive it. Right?
What about the concept of like cheating, for example? If you're sacrificing, if you're in a relationship and you make a promise to somebody that you're just going to be with him or her, and then, cheating comes to mind because you're making a sacrifice to be with that one person.
Right. So I see what you're saying. So how do you not demand that person's sacrifice?
Yeah.
In order to, still have your love.
But if it's a sacrifice, that's where the problem is. If the other person is sacrificing to have this relationship with you so they're not cheating, then they don't really want to be there with just you. So you are asking them to not be who they are.
Right.
And
so it's like, okay, how do I love them without demanding a sacrifice of them? I mean, if that's what they want, then how do I love them and love myself without demanding a sacrifice of them and not demanding a sacrifice of myself? So maybe that might look like saying to that person, hey man, you are innocent, you deserve to have what you want, and I also am not going, I don't need, love isn't asking me to sacrifice what I want, which is somebody who wants to be in a monogamous relationship with me. And so I'm not going to demand that you sacrifice what you want, and I'm not going to make the demand that I sacrifice what I want. So peace be to you, my brother.
Yeah.
You know, so it might look like that if you were trying to practically apply the idea that love demands no sacrifice.
In other words, these two might be not reconcilable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Disengage with love.
Exactly. And only if your consciousness is dominated by the scarcity error would that be hard to do. Because if your mind wasn't dominated by the scarcity error, you would go like, oh, thank you for releasing me to now go find someone who really is compatible. Hallelujah, because there ain't no shortage. Right? It's only the scarcity error in your belief that makes you go, I gotta hold on to them. I have to sacrifice what I want to hold on to them, and I gotta make them sacrifice in order to stay with me. You know, it's only when you are dominated by the belief there's not enough.
But you do see that everywhere.
Absolutely. Hey, it's the belief system of the world.
Well, their sacrifice makes you feel special.
That's right.
And so
That's
the more
right.
the more that you can get somebody else to sacrifice, the more special you feel.
That's exactly
Your
right.
ego gets,
I must really
you
miss
know,
somebody.
massaged and
Yeah.
That's right.
grows from that.
Exactly. And the I don't feel special enough is the manifestation of the scarcity error that has been accepted as fact.
Right.
You know, there's not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And the only reason I don't know that I'm enough is because I don't know my source. And I don't know my source because I'm afraid of him. Or her, or whatever.
And you learn that.
Hell yeah.
When you look at an infant, they are convinced that they are the greatest thing that was ever born.
That's
until
right.
we
Absolutely.
teach them that they're not.
That's right. Exactly. Oh yeah, we learn the scarcity error. And it's only the scarcity error that says there's not enough love to go around, there's not enough resources to go around, I don't have enough value and worth within me, and I need to get it. And the way I'm going to get it is I'm going to demand that they give it to me, even if it's a sacrifice for them. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make them feel guilty, and I'm going to say, hey, that's what love does. And then I'm going to make them feel guilty
That does
and
sound
call it love. And that's what we do. That passes for human relationships in this world. And it all comes from the scarcity error that we are believing as if it is a fact. Okay? Right. So if the scarcity error wasn't dominating my belief system, I would laugh at the idea that love demands sacrifice. I would laugh at the idea that someone needed to give up who they are to make me feel good enough. And I would laugh at the idea of somebody saying that I needed to give up who I am in order to prove my love to them. I mean, I'd be like, glad that's not true, right? So
in short, we gave a lot of things meanings that they never had.
Exactly.
And we don't see our error in that.
Exactly. And we don't see our error in that. Exactly. All right. So, let me see, what time is it? Okay, doing good? All right. Okay, then it says, okay, so now it's going to do another biblical quote, and I don't know whether that's the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, or the New Testament. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Look, charming.
It's Old Testament.
Thank you. Okay. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, is a strictly karmic viewpoint. And it is a real misperception of truth by which man assigns his own so-called evil past to God. Isn't that interesting? It's a strictly karmic viewpoint in which I'm assigning my own evil past to God, okay? So like, maybe I can't get you, but God will. And, you know, he'll get you even long after I'm gone, and he'll get your kids too. Well, isn't that special? So, so that belief that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, as if that's God's business, that is absolutely just me wanting to project my punishing ego onto God, which is what we have done to God. We totally projected our own ego onto God, and now we think God is just like us. In other words, the truth is God made us in His image, and we returned the favor and have now made God into our own image. Right?
What I really think is funny about that quote, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay.
Yes.
We always use that as our justification for us to be vengeful.
That's right.
And it clearly said, this is my bailiwick,
That's
you
right.
stay out of it.
Exactly. That's right.
How we could have totally turned that around was nothing more than that's what we wanted to hear.
That's what we're best at, turning stuff around. He says the so-called evil conscience from the past has nothing to do with God. God did not create it, and God does not maintain it. God doesn't believe in karmic retribution. Oh, really? Isn't that great? God doesn't believe in retribution. That is not how it says. God's divine mind does not create that way. God doesn't hold the evil deeds of a man even against himself. And so is it likely then that God would hold against anyone the evil that another did?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, God doesn't even hold your errors against you.
yeah.
And is it likely that He's going to hold your errors against her? That's insane. You see, God doesn't think like that. And so that whole idea of God thinking with retribution and associating punishment with God and sacrifice and love and sacrifice, those are some very old, fundamental, deeply lodged misperceptions in the human psyche that really have to be purged and corrected, so that we can take our function here and also not be afraid of the source of all our good.
Is that like addressing karma and things like that? In other words, okay, your guilt produced this or that bad thing. That's all you're doing. Given God's choice, no, none of that would happen.
Exactly. I mean, God doesn't hold your errors against you. He doesn't remember what you did, you know, and then get you back for it later, just when you're having a good time and you think is that you've forgotten about it, and then messes with your kids. How many generations down the line? Remember in the Bible it says, you know, I'll visit your sins upon the
7.
Doesn't he sound like a psycho killer? I mean, not only is he going to punish you, but then he's going to stalk
That's right.
your children and grandchildren. What kind of psycho killer is he? You know, but it's not until you bring those old beliefs that have become primitive human beliefs, it's not until you bring them out into the open where we go, that's insane. That's insane. We don't even know we have those beliefs. What we do, we have the vestiges of those beliefs in the way that we associate love with sacrifice. And in the way we don't talk and listen to God because we're afraid of God, right? You know, if you believe that love demands sacrifice, and if you believe God is love, then wow. I mean, look how human love makes you sacrifice. Imagine what divine love would make you sacrifice. And so, you know, human love's scary enough. Forget about divine love. You know, I can't afford that. Right? So then it says, Be very sure you recognize how utterly impossible this assumption really is and how entirely it arises from misprojection. This kind of error is responsible for a host of related errors, including the belief that God rejected man and forced man out of the Garden of Eden. It's also responsible for the fact that you may believe from time to time that I am misdirecting you. I have made every effort to use words that are almost impossible to distort, but man is very inventive when it comes to twisting symbols around. Wow. So that whole belief that God thinks in the way of retribution and punishment, and God is going to hold your evil deeds against her, and is going to hold her evil deeds against you, and that he's going to punish you down the line, says that's responsible for a whole host of related errors. Like, for instance, God kicked his beloved Adam and Eve out of the garden. Because why? They ate an apple. I don't know, ate an apple and got a little smarter, and God kicked them out of paradise. You know, so that's another. You can see how that comes from that error of associating God and punishment and love and punishment. Wow, and it's all.
You can see why he told them not to, though. I mean, this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is judgment. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they did, they judged themselves unworthy.
Yes.
You know.
But he also talks about the Garden of Eden, and he says that the tree of knowledge and the apple was a symbol for usurping the throne of God. In other words, I wanted to be God. I want to say what reality is. I want to be the author of reality. I want to decide what your reality is according to how I feel each day. You know, in other words, I want to judge. You know, but he also says that that God doesn't think like that. God doesn't behave like that. You ate from the tree of knowledge. Get out. Get out. You know, thank God doesn't think like us. I mean, we've totally tried to make God think like us, because what better justification for our mean thinking than to say, well, God did it, God does it, right? And the only reason we go, God did it, that's our prominent justification. That's our prominent defense for keeping our addiction to attack going and feeling good about it, right? I want to be able to judge and attack and get vengeance on people, but still feel like a good person. I'm a good person, right? And so I'll keep that perception of God with a punishing intent. Because I would like to keep my punishing intent.
All of our beliefs and ideas that we really cherish, we try to give them back to God. We try to find how they're from a higher authority than us.
That's right.
Every time.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't matter what it is. We're looking for that. Oh, this must be divinely inspired.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also that whole belief that God believes in retribution and punishment and, holding your mistakes against someone else and vice versa. That whole misperception, that projection, is also responsible for the phenomena where you feel like or worry that Spirit is misdirecting you, where you don't really trust your internal guide and your internal teacher. You have a voice within you, the voice that God put there, that always speaks for His love. It always speaks for, I love you unconditionally. You don't have to demand, you don't have to sacrifice, you don't have to lose. I don't punish, I only correct errors that are offered to me. There's that voice that is definitely within us. Absolutely, it's a fact. And it's always there to guide us and to help us and to comfort us and to protect us. It's always there. But there are times that you may notice that you don't trust it. Or maybe you notice you don't trust it because you never listen to it. Or maybe when you hear it, then you notice that you either become afraid or you don't follow it because you don't trust it. Why? Because of that belief that love punishes and that love demands sacrifice, which means love demands suffering. And so if I hear the voice for love within me, and it sounds loving to me, and it says, I love you unconditionally. You don't need to change. You're perfect the way you are. You're complete. Let me remind you of your perfection. Let me remind you, you're not empty. You're not missing anything. You have it all right now. We hear the voice for love within you, but we don't trust it because we've so associated love with sacrifice.
That's what we think manipulating people tell us.
That's exactly right. They just tell you what you want to hear. They're just blowing smoke up you. That's exactly right. And he says that that's why we have that mistrust of the inner voice that speaks lovingly to us and other people who speak lovingly to us.
Well, and then it's perpetrated by, or perpetuated, I should say, by being children of parents
Unconscious
who
parents.
have come through the same system and been instilled
absolutely.
with the same values, and so they do say things like,
Oh,
if I don't point this out to you and fix you, then, you know, who will?
exactly.
For your own good.
That's right.
Have to
Exactly.
lay down
I
the
mean,
law or whatever.
We've all learned and have it wired into our brain that love is guilt, love is attack, love demands sacrifice, and we've learned that love kills to save. Crazy. But we've all learned it, and it's so wired, so deeply in. And he's just here, he's just telling us how it began. You know, it's like how it got wired in. Well, we started hearing these stories through our religions. This is what God is, this is what he does. This is what, and God is love. P.S. Okay, okay, oh, I guess that means love punishes and demands sacrifice. Okay. And so when somebody comes around us and they are genuinely loving, and they don't demand us to change or give up who we are for them to accept us perfectly, what do we say about those folks? Boring. They don't really love me. They don't really care about me. The person over here who's attacking me and guilting me into changing for them, they love me. I'm going to go with them. The person who comes around and just accepts us unconditionally, we don't trust them. We think they're a liar. And the person who's demanding sacrifice and it's never good enough, and they say they're doing it for our own good, and so because they love us, then we believe them and think that they are giving us love, and so we go with them. And that's how that core mistake ends up in our practical lives. That's why he's saying those core beliefs about God and punishment have got to be purged, meaning corrected once and for all, so that we can be free of that misprojection and be able to actually experience real love from God, from others, for ourselves.
But do you think about listening to our voice? You know, we all do that, and we have our old background in fear thoughts, and then you start learning this, and a lot of these old ideas get changed. And I think it seems like, and I just throw that out to that we get really confused about what we're listening to.
Oh, absolutely.
During our learning stage
That's
of
exactly
the new
right.
versus the old. And
That's right.
we don't know if a lot, it seems to me a lot, I don't know if that was the ego or if that was the
That's right.
Holy Spirit.
That's exactly right. And so at the beginning of your curriculum as a teacher of peace, a teacher of truth, at the beginning it will seem a little difficult to tell which voice you're hearing. Is that the voice of the ego, meaning vengeance, candy-coated, or is that the voice of love? You know, which one is that? But you know, if you stay with that path, the whole purpose of this curriculum is to teach you how to tell the difference between those voices and how to choose more consistently to side with the voice for love.
I think it's too why he said things like, I can take care of things that don't matter, and I can help you with things that, even through your confusion.
That's right, exactly.
Probably you don't have to worry about that. Have a little trust, is that
That's
what
right.
that's all about?
Exactly.
Even when you're confused, have a little trust.
Exactly. And one of the great ways to be able to distinguish between the two voices, okay, or love or fear, is which one is demanding sacrifice? Which one is saying you got to give up something to gain? Okay? So that's going to be your good clue. Okay? And so the voice that says, listen, you're perfect as you are now. You deserve it now. You don't need to change in order to deserve it now. You can have it all now. You don't have to prove anything else. You don't have to earn it. You are entitled to it all now. That's going to be the voice for love. Okay? The voice for the ego will always be making bargains, negotiating, telling you how to manipulate others by sacrificing something of yourself, thereby making them feel guilty enough to sacrifice for you. You know, and it's always going to be working that angle. You know, that's one little clue of how to tell the difference between those two voices. One's always working an angle to get something from someone else. And it always entails guilt on some level, right? And sacrifice, the belief that somebody's got to give up for somebody else to gain is going to find its way in there somewhere. That's how you can tell the ego's voice. Okay?
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to stop here for this evening. So we're going to do our love offering. And thank you guys for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about my holistic counseling practice, you can go to Kujawa.com. You can find out how you can schedule a Miracle Psychotherapeutic session with me.
Next week.
Oh yes, next week I'm going to New York, so I won't be here, and Jim will be facilitating the class, and Jim does a splendid job. Thank you, Jim. Okay? So there will be class. There'll be gym class. Gym class. Come experience a whole new interpretation of gym class.
I'll catch it if you're throwing it.
Okay, so as we're closing up, any questions or comments? What was it like to hear this material tonight?
Very interesting.
It was fabulous. Thank you very much. I really think that the Holy Spirit's going to give us these lessons through our life. It's going to say, well, here you have a friend that's an alcoholic or something like that, or a son that might be an alcoholic, and the lesson is that how can I totally and unconditionally come from Spirit and accept this person,
Yes.
instead of thinking that this person needs to change.
Yes.
And the change that I would demand might be all kinds of things.
That's
and of
right.
course, everything that would be ego.
Yes.
Would be coming from that I'm asking that person to sacrifice.
That's right.
Even if you're asking them to sacrifice something that you think might be healthy for them.
For their own good.
For their own good.
Yes.
Yeah. That,
Yeah. Yes, he goes,
love with sacrifice.
be alert to the ego in the form of, I'm just asking you to do this for your own good.
Right.
You know, I'm just correcting your ego, your errors for your own good. Exactly. And thinking you're doing good. Because real love doesn't demand anything. It doesn't make any demands. Real love says, I accept you unconditionally now. And it doesn't demand sacrifice of itself either. So, so using the analogy of having the alcoholic son or daughter, I accept you, I'm not demanding that you stop drinking or change. I'm not demanding that. I'm just telling you I accept you and I love you. And I'm also not going to demand sacrifice of myself. And if it would be a sacrifice to be around somebody who was acting dangerously or unsafely, then I'm not going to ask myself to sacrifice and be in that person's presence.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask them, I'm not going to demand they change, but I'm also not going to demand that I sacrifice my safety.
Yeah, emotional, even if it's emotional.
Even if it's emotional. So this is the practical way that we apply that truth.
I like that phrase, disengaging with love. When I was listening to my sister today, I thought there is absolutely no point in making any observation. I just decided that I had run out of time to be the projection board for her barrage of complaints and grievances. And they weren't directed at me, they were just directed at the world. But I knew there was no ear to hear.
Right,
Was not
exactly.
the right time
And-
and place.
And another characteristic of love is it doesn't force itself on anybody. That's why you don't hear the voice of God until you want it. Because now the ego for sure imposes itself on you. It doesn't care whether you want it or not. That's the way the ego is. It just imposes its will on you. But love waits on welcome. It doesn't make any demands, and it waits on welcome. And until then, it just sits and waits in patience for you, knowing that at some point you will have a tiny little willingness and a tiny little desire for love to come into your heart and heal you. And at that moment, right there, it's been waiting there all along. Love waits on welcome, right? And that's another way you can tell the difference between the voice for love and the voice of the ego, right?
He brought up a really good one, and I think applies to all of us all the time. In that, when we think of alcoholism, is certainly not good for someone. That's the immediate thought.
That's right. That's our judgment.
That's accepted.
It's not good for them.
Almost always I find that when I'm trying to change me or them or whatever, I've already decided what's in somebody's best interest,
That's right.
whether it be mine or theirs, and to give up that idea that I really don't know, which that's just the truth of the matter.
That is the truth of the matter.
When you get really honest, you don't know and that's your best way out of that, trying to get yourself or somebody to do this or that or whatever, is to realize that you don't really know what is in the best for
Exactly. You don't know what their curriculum is.
Yeah.
Maybe their curriculum is that they need another year of hanging out on the bottom before they are really, really able to make that decision to save themselves. And here you are, you come in and you're going to try to deprive them of that year that they need on the bottom. As if what's best for them,
I find we cause ourselves a lot of suffering by thinking we know what's best.
It's the same thing as the belief that love kills to save or love punishes to save. That old belief that God punishes his children for their own good is the same belief we are suffering from, thinking, I'm in punishing and correcting and trying to change them, I'm helping them. Well, God does it, so we tell ourselves. That which we're doing with each other, we're doing that based on, we're using those old beliefs about God to justify that.
Would you say that the Course is saying to look at that situation and to I go back to what Jim was saying, that I don't know, and to help me forgive my judgments. And forgiveness looks, waits, judges not.
That's right.
And then to quiet down and ask the Holy Spirit what to do with that.
Yes.
Yeah, to get that voice of love.
Yeah.
And say, I understand what you're saying, that you still love yourself enough to say this is not acceptable in my life. But even before you say that,
That's right.
I think you have to ask how this is my classroom,
Right.
and this person is my lesson, and how can I be in a loving place for this?
Exactly. And so now we've come full circle, because now you can see why this particular section is in the section with the bigger title, Special Principles of Miracle Workers. If you're going to be a healer, a teacher of peace and truth in this world, you better understand the truth about love, right? And if you're going to be a healer, meaning somebody who gives love, offers love, and teaches love, then you need to know that you as a teacher of love are somebody who needs to know what love really is. And it's something that does not demand sacrifice. That's the main thing. It doesn't demand sacrifice, and it doesn't punish, and it doesn't punish for people's own good.
So if it seems either to demand sacrifice from me or from them,
Yes,
I need to keep asking until I get that answer where it's of neither.
exactly. That's exactly
Because I'm
right.
really, it doesn't matter which one, but I haven't
Right.
really got the answer yet.
Exactly. And as a miracle worker and a teacher of peace and truth, you need to understand people's fear of love. Even while they're like, I want love, I want love, I want love. They're looking. You need to understand their fear of love. Here you are, a teacher of love. You better understand that they have a fear of love, because when you start giving love and they act crazy and they start attacking you and sabotaging, and you're scratching your head like, well, I thought I said love. Then you as a teacher will become confused if you don't understand that they're terrified of love, because they too have learned that love equals sacrifice. They too believe love is sacrifice. So here you are, a teacher of love, and you're offering love, and they're acting like you came at them with a knife. You need to understand what's going on so you can still be a good teacher and not be confused. You need to understand people's fear of truth. You need to understand people's fear of love.
I see.
If you're a teacher of love, you better understand that, so that you don't, misinterpret.
Your love will not always be received lovingly.
And you need to know that. That's exactly right. Same thing with being a Course in Miracles teacher. You need, if you're going to be a teacher of truth, you need to understand people's fear of truth, so that you don't take it personal when you say love and they say, get the hell out of my face. Or they act like you attacked them, or they run away from you. Gosh, I was just telling them that they are love. I was telling them they deserve love. I was telling them they don't need to change for love. I was telling them that love accepts them as they are. Why are they running away? I don't understand. Is it me? And he says, no. If you're going to be a teacher, you need to know about that so you don't take it personal. So you don't go, God, I'm a bad teacher.
Because it will often feel like attack, because you are threatening their ideas.
And that's exactly right.
Release.
If you don't understand people's fear of release, then when you offer them release and they reject you, you're going to take it personal. And then you will slow down your curriculum as a teacher. And you don't want to do that. You'll stunt it.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to do a 2-minute integration meditation. And the purpose here is just to allow the ideas to kind of just percolate down for a bit. I'm going to let the ideas percolate down and set. We're going to let these ideas percolate down like seeds burrowing down into a rich and fertile soil of our minds. So just take a breath. And I want you to just tune into how you feel right now, having heard these ideas tonight. How does it feel having heard these ideas tonight? And I want you to bring to your awareness a situation, either today or within the last week or so, that felt frightening to you, or felt painful to you, or confusing. I want you to bring that situation into your awareness. And I want you to take note of how that situation was feeling, what was the dominant emotion. And now let's go ahead and ask for the correction that comes demanding no sacrifice, no punishment, no pain. And so we say, Spirit of truth, Spirit of healing within me, I ask for the correction of this in your most gentle, win-win manner. I ask for your gentle correction of whatever beliefs I have that produced this situation. And then I want you to tell yourself, I will not feel guilty about it. I will stop punishing myself for it. And I ask for the correction. And I want you to tell yourself, I do not need to be punished to have these old beliefs corrected. I do not have to suffer in order to have this situation and these beliefs corrected. And I ask for the beliefs that gave rise to this situation be corrected for me gently. And I want you to look into that situation, and I want you to look into it and see if you can see a place where you were demanding somebody lose something or sacrifice something for you to gain. Or look and see where the other person involved was asking you to, or demanding that you sacrifice something that they may gain. Where's the demand for sacrifice in the name of love or the name of their best interest? Where is it in this situation? Because that's where the seed of the conflict really is in that situation. And if you can locate the place where you were demanding that they give up something for you to gain in the name of love, go ahead and take back that demand. We say, I no longer demand that you change in order to be happy. I no longer demand that you change in order for me to be happy. I am sorry. I apologize for my demand that you change or lose so that I could gain. And say to that person in your mind's eye, I release you from my demand of sacrifice. I release you from my demand that you change so that I can be happy. And now maybe we do that to yourself. I now release myself from all the demands that I've made on myself that I need to change about myself in order to be happy. And I ask for correction of the belief that I somehow need to change who I am or give up who I am in order to be happy. I accept myself as love created me now, perfect, complete, eternal. And just breathe on that, breathe that in. Notice how that kind of work, how that kind of application feels. Beautiful. And then just open your eyes and bring your awareness back to the room. All right.
Thank
So
you.
is it nice to do some practical application there? That's what it's all about for me. You know, we hear the ideas and then we use them on whatever we're going through. That, to me, that's the purpose of this curriculum. You know, that we use them to bring us peace that we're entitled to. All right. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
I'm glad you came. Welcome. Thank you. Hey, Joe, will you push that button again? Will you push that button again?
Oh, can I share with you?
We'll push the button again.
I will push the button.